Greetings, this is Sam Pollock speaking on behalf of Team FakeID. I'm going to be presenting the game design document we've prepared for our game Untitled Tower Defense. So one more time, here's our team. We've got Sam Pollock on producer, Morgan Ethier, software lead Robert Wymer, on programmer Lucas Dunster. Dunster is the designer, and Erik Enos is the programmer. Let's jump right in to our game design document. I'll blaze through this intro here. We've got a table of contents that'll lead you through. But to start off, we prepared an elevator pitch to give the reader an overall sense of the game and to sort of summarize what it is that we think is special about this game, why it'd be worth paying attention to in the first place. So I'm going to go right in and read that part out. It says, what do you get if you take the best parts of a mobile tower defense, a city builder, and an idle game and put them together into one game? Take a look at Idle TD, a game where your enemies march along the roads that you build and face endless hails of projectiles from your towers. Set the game down for some idle play and let your towers do their work, then return when you're ready to spend your saved up resources to upgrade your fortifications and to bring even more enemies onto the map to earn even more resources. So we tried to touch on the major pillars there of the game, which is the tower defense aspect, the idle game game flow, where they can do idle and active play, as well as the part where you lay out your own roads, which is part of the way that the player expression comes together, and why one screenshot of the game would give the player a bunch of information about who's playing and how, and what their strategy is, and what stage they're at. So next up we get into the game mechanics. We touch first off on the tower defense aspect. It gets some of the basic logic about the towers, what might make one tower different from the other, and what their stats are for while we're programming them. As well as we've got a design note at the bottom there. We've got those throughout the document where I've touched on what it is we're trying to touch on that design and what we want the designers to attend to while we're building the game. And why we've made the decisions in the intended player experience. So here we say that we want that one of the aspects is while you're playing a tower defense, you're tapping the gold or tapping your towers to pick up the gold that they collect. And we want part of that is it's going to keep you exploring the map and keeping track of your towers. Even if you were playing a little bit idly, you're going to need to keep track of where your towers are killing enemies and what they're dealing with and how much gold you're accruing. And also that we don't want you to just generate infinite gold idly. We want you to check back in to build a habit of playing. Next up, we've got more information about placing the roads. Again, the design note, we describe the way that works, and the design note tells you that laying out the roads is part of the strategy, and then players can lay out the roads to send the enemies around a maze or to send them straight to your most powerful towers. We touch on the multiple in-game resources. Here we've got the gold, stone, crystal, and XP. They're each earned in a different way, and they're spent together and separately on different upgrades and level ups in the game. Those should always be creeping up, but not always in sync, which keeps the player making new decisions about how to make best use of whatever resource surplus and whatever resource scarcity they're facing. We describe the on-map resources. That's how that stone and crystal is spread on the map and how the player collects them. Then the information about the enemy spawners. In this case, the enemies aren't necessarily a threat. They're a resource for the player to draw on. So they're going to place those spawners, which are going to generate those enemies, which they're going to destroy with their towers, which is going to earn them more money to buy more spawners, to build more towers, and to accelerate their progression. Next up, we got the level ups. Again, it's one of those resources. This one we've set to increase for gathering resources, not just from destroying enemies, so that there's no strange exploit the player is pursuing where they try to stagger their progression in a weird way that would lead to unintended gameplay. And then you can spend your level ups on enemy spawners and resource nodes, as we described there. And next up, the surge. This is our sort of big climax that happens periodically in the game. We describe this as a burst of enemies that come out all at once. And unlike the other play, the player can't just take as long as they want. They have a limited time to deal with the surge. Failing to deal with the surge doesn't result in a game loss. Instead, it means you're leaving a bunch of valuable bonus on the table. We mentioned that in the design notes, how we want to keep it fair, predictable, and keep it as a big win possibility, not the risk of a big loss, because the big loss is incompatible with with the sort of idle game progression we're looking for. The next up, we take a tour of the inspirations. I've got a key screenshot from the major games, as well as the takeaways and what we were attending to in that game design and what worked there that we hope to work here. So Mini Motorways, Loop Hero, Kingdom Rush, Clash of Clans, and Tap Titans. So that was running the gamut of the tower defense, the idle game, and the city builder. And then for posterity, we've taken down the additional references, which are other games that we were discussing in design and development. Next up, we start getting into the gritty details like the camera and the camera control. So this is where, like a game like Clash of Clans or Kingdom Rush, you're looking top-down at the environment, and you're tapping to drag along so that you can explore it, and we've got that pinch to zoom so that you can take a closer look or get a more bird's-eye view of how your progress is going. Some controls, we mentioned both keyboard and mouse for the early development, as well as the mobile touchscreen controls for later. We get into the specifics about how the controls are going to work for multi-step processes, like placing a tower, where you open up the tower drawer, select the tower, or tap it to look at its details and price. Select the tower, drag it onto the game screen, and then we're making sure that we've got steps to confirm or to double check their placement, so that the player doesn't accidentally move their finger and end up with a tower not where they want it. And then same for placing roads, because placing towers and placing roads are some big decisions and where you're spending your resources. We want that working in a predictable and intuitive way. Next up, we talk about upgrading the towers and collecting the resources, more of that sort of moment-to-moment gameplay. And then saving and loading. Our plan at this stage is to do what's pretty common in these mobile games, especially the ones that end up always online or dealing with microtransactions, which is not the stage we're at right now, but we want to design in that paradigm. So here we've got progress saves automatically, and it loads when you load up, and you can, from the menu, you can select a restart, which erases your progress and lets you start it again from scratch. Next we go into some more details about gameplay, like the tower types and their upgrades. And then, so for example, we've got at the top here, at the bottom of the right side of the screen, the arrow towers, which are the most basic one. We describe each of the variables that determines its behavior, like how much it costs, the range, the rate of fire, like how many seconds between shots, how much damage each shot does, and its storage. That's where, from the mechanics panel, you're collecting gold by tapping it as it falls out as you destroy enemies, and your nearby towers will collect up to an amount of gold, which means you can check on your towers and collect their 80 gold, or your arrow towers in this case. And then as they upgrade it, it increases their damage, range, speed, and a bonus once you've fully upgraded it, which allows it to fire at 2 targets at once, changing its behavior, and that's something for you to strive for as you're playing. We've got the same stuff for cannon towers, oil towers, and ice towers, each with their own gameplay scenarios and how they might be incorporated into your strategy. And then we have utility towers. This is where we have a design note describing the difference between a style of play that focuses more on the active stuff, where you're looking at your screen and tapping and doing work, and the idle stuff, where you check in every few minutes and collect your gold. And in this case, the storage towers and drill towers are built to support more of that idle play. We've got a bunch of details here about the enemy types. Each enemy type comes from a spawner, which is placed on the map as you level up. Spawners have different rates of spawns, different enemies they spawn. Those enemies have different variables, and just by tweaking the variables in between these enemies, like their health and speed and gold value and XP value, we're going to get really different gameplay scenarios. And we have our screen mockups. We show the menu screens from the start screen instructions and options, as well as some gameplay. We go a little deeper into that gameplay, showing that building menu popping out as you tap the button on the right side of the screen, and the tower placement confirmation. And we describe the aesthetic we're looking for, as well as some screenshots from asset packs we're making use of. So we're using that Kenny's asset pack. At this stage, we're still working both with the isometric one and the top-down one. As we get just a couple more steps into development, it's going to become clear which one is most compatible with our flow of programming in Unity. And then for characters, I've just got references here to Clash of Clans and Kingdom Rush, as well as a description of what we're looking for. We're looking for those those look cartoony, kind of family-friendly, and easily readable, and units that convey a lot about their behavior with the way that they appear. And then it's a UI screenshot from an asset pack that we purchased the license for. Some details about the game world and about how it's a fantasy world with aspects of sort of business and farming, because you're not necessarily defending your castle, you're just making use of tower defense mechanics to build your empire. And we have sample details about what the player sees in early game and what they're occupied with. So they start off on that empty map with just one goblin hutch spawning goblins and enough money to build a few towers. From there, they generate resource, learn how the game works, shift their priorities, and develop their strategy. And in the mid-game, things get a little more complicated, more variety, more strategy, a more unique setup for the player. And finally, in the end game, where it gets really busy and their focus is primarily on the surge, so those periodic, extra powerful enemies who give bonus resources. And the game is balanced in such a way that not only is that going to become the primary focus, it's going to happen more frequently as you make faster progress. So as the player gets better at the game, they're not necessarily playing less of it. And finally, at this stage, we have a win state, because designing this to go into infinity is unfeasible at this stage. So instead, at a certain level, you've reached the kill screen and you've beaten the game. And we've got a sprite index to guide us in our search for assets, mentioning each of the sprites that we need, as well as a sound index doing the same for the audio effects. And then finally, we close off with a mention of our key upcoming milestones, as well as that future features for us to attend to. We're going to be adding to this as we develop. Inevitably, there's a little bit of that feature creep, but we want to keep what we need to do for the project in line, and record the stuff that we think is a good idea as future or next steps, so that if the project does carry on, we know where to add to it. Okay, so thank you very much. This was Sam Pollock presenting for Team FakeID. Here we are.